Well, hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the cabin. It's February here, dead of winter, and there's not a lot going on today. Uh, Weather here has been extreme lately, this winter, I should say. You know, one week it's rains, it's 40 degrees and raining, then the next week it's 20 below, and then the next week back up to in the 30s or 40s and raining. It's hard to get used to. Man, I'll tell you, I'd rather have it just kind of a little more even, but it is what it is. And you know, I was thinking today as I was doing just, mundane tasks, clean up the cabin, and, you know, there's not really a lot to do outside. There's actually just enough of a crust of ice on top of the snow that you can't walk in the woods anywhere. You can't even snowshoe. You try snowshoeing, you just break through the ice. It's really hard going and not really fun. So yeah, there's not a lot to do. So I thought it'd be a good day to do a video about what it's really like to live in a cabin in the woods. Well, I should say, I'll try to explain what it's like to live in a cabin in the woods as best I can in a 10-15 minute video. You know, we all hear the name Dick Prinicky dropped a lot in these cabin type videos. And of course, he was a legend, and his video Alone in the Wilderness is a classic. And it's inspired countless people to, get out in nature and spend more time in the woods and build a cabin and live in it. Yeah, but, that video Alone in the Wilderness, even though it covers a span of a year, it really doesn't cover everything that happened to him in a year. He's really just filming the best parts, the good parts, That's not really what it's like year-round to live in a cabin in the woods. So what is it like? Well, I'll talk about that in this video, and I'll go back and I'll talk about some of the things that I do in the run of a year, some of the video clips that I talk about. I'll put in some clips in this video, and anything that I use, I'll put a link in the description below of the full video, so go back and check out some of my other videos. But a lot of the things that you'd have to put up with or endure at a cabin, don't make it to the videos. Not mine, not Dick Prinicky's, not most people's, because they're not exciting. They're not fun to watch. It's not like, wow. I mean, who wants to sit here? Who wants to sit and watch a video of me sitting around the cabin for 3-4 days in a row because there's really nothing to do? You can't go outside. Like I said, I watch movies, I read books, I clean the cabin, I go outside, I do little things here and there, grab some firewood, but those things don't make exciting videos. And then there's the other extreme. I gotta mention what it's not like to live in a cabin in the woods. A few years ago, they started coming out with these shows. There was two that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head. One was Mountain Men, and the other was Live Free or Die. Wow, at first when I heard about those shows, I had high hopes. I thought, wow, that might be interesting. Those shows were so far off the rails, so phony, so fake, that I could hardly watch them. I would sit and watch an episode of Mountain Men, and I would just be thinking, what in the world? Those reality shows are faked, and the producers, they just try to fake these shows and set up fake scenes, and some of these people aren't even really living in the woods, for goodness sakes. I mean, anyways, those shows just drive me nuts because they're so fake. Anyways, back to Dick Prinicky, there's probably lots of times during the recording or filming, I guess, of his Alone in the Wilderness that year, there were probably a lot of times where there was nothing for him to do either. And his cabin was only 11 by 15. Now, I think this is 12 by 24, and sometimes I think, and it is small, but he had an 11 by 15 cabin. And I can guarantee you there were a lot of days that he probably had to sit in that cabin and just sit there alone with his thoughts, write in his journal, just get through the day, maybe go outside and shovel some snow, just make something to do. But weather dependent, you really can't just go outside. Some people might think that he only was in the cabin to eat and sleep. As a matter of fact, I think I had one person comment that in one of my other videos. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's lots of times because of the weather, you really just can't go do anything. And that's just the way it is. Now here, for me, I'm way, way up in the far northeast corner of the map, and we're blessed with all 4 seasons. In the summer, the days are long, they're hot, and there's a lot of bugs. And then in the winter, the days are short, and it's freezing cold. In those short days of winter, though, you know, there's only so much you can do. And in Alaska and up north, you know, I think they have a close to a 2-month period where it's almost total darkness, 24 hours a day. I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like to live like that. But, you know, if you're in a cabin in the middle of nowhere and it's dark almost 24 hours a day, there's not a lot you can do in the dark, especially in the winter. So you got to remember that. So living in a cabin in the woods, I think you got to be 2 things. I think you got to have some physical strength. I think you got to be physically fit. But I also think you have to be mentally fit. Because I know people who they couldn't be alone for more than 5 minutes. They just couldn't do it. They've got to be around other people. But if you're in a cabin in the woods, you've got to be able to be okay with yourself. Now, there's another extreme too, which are hermits who never want to be around people, and that's not me. I like being around people. I like people. I like most people. And but I want to be around people. But I can be here for extended periods of time, and it doesn't bother me. Like it just doesn't bother me. I don't know why. It's just the way I'm wired. But there certainly is. Cabin fever is a real thing. And, you know, of course, if it sets in on me, and it does from time to time, you start getting squirrely. Cabin fever does set in. You know, I at least have the option, weather dependent. I have the option that I can get out of here and I can drive to town if I have to, if it really starts to bother me. Whereas, you know, I guess somebody like Dick Prenneke couldn't. He didn't have that option. There's no leaving there until somebody came to get him in a bush plane. So I would imagine there were lots of times, you know, he just had to endure it. And again, I think he was probably mentally wired that way, that, you know, he could take that and it didn't bother him like it would some people. Another thing I wanted to talk about is wildlife. Because if you're going to live in a cabin in the woods, you are going to have to deal with wildlife. And that's just the way it is. You're going to have good encounters and you're going to have bad encounters. Okay? And you have to be prepared for both. And again, you know, some people, I don't know, they have this bizarre idea about nature, but let me tell you something about nature. In all of its beauty, it's cold and it doesn't care. Nature does not care about you. You're just another animal in the woods to nature. Nature doesn't care that you're a human. Nature means nothing. You know, part of living in a cabin in the woods is dealing with wildlife, and it's not always a pleasant thing. You have to protect yourself, and you have to protect what you have. You have to protect your food. Everything out here is hungry, man, and everything wants to eat, and it's really hard. You know, it's really hard. It's a constant battle. for food out here. And I grow a garden in the summertime, for example. And I do the best I can to keep animals out of it. But you know what? There's sometimes you just have to get rid of the animals. And that's just the way it is. You can't get rid of the deer, unfortunately. The deer come in the summer. Boy, they're bad. But I got a fence up, keeps them out of my garden. Groundhogs, you got to get rid of them. It's just the way it is. But there's everything wants to eat what you have. And it doesn't stop. At one time, I had some chickens out here. I don't have chickens anymore because I can get eggs anyways, so I don't really need to keep chickens here. Although I liked it, but man, you have no idea out in the middle of the woods, the predators that chickens attract. And it was just constant, non-stop. And you've got to always be there and to protect them because that's what you have to do. You also have to protect yourself. Now, here's the worst advice that somebody can give you. Black bears will always run from you and are always more scared of you than you are of them. Not true. It's true 99.5% of the time, but that other 0.5% of the time, it's not true. And bears are a dangerous animal, can be a dangerous animal. I've had 2 encounters in my life with black bears that did not end well for the bear. But I felt I had no choice. And that's something you have to be prepared to do. And that means out here, protecting yourself and your food and everything else, it means having guns. Some people don't like guns. I personally like guns. I have a lot of guns. I always have a gun handy here because I'm in the middle of the woods. And I feel like I need one. I need a gun here. And if you're going to live in the woods, you're going to need a gun. That's just the way it is. You'll probably need several. And I don't want to kill anything, but I don't hesitate. Because again, I have to. There's no feelings involved. It's not that I want to or don't want to. It's just a thing I have to do. Period. Now, back to these bears. One time, when I was just a young man, I did encounter a black bear in the woods, a young male. And I startled him, he startled me. And of course, I screamed at him, clapped my hands, and he bolted like he should. But he only went a few yards. And he stopped. And I don't know what was in his mind, what made him stop. But he stopped and he turned. And he wasn't very far away. Like I'm talking maybe 20 yards. And man, those things can move so fast. Like you have to act very quickly. Anyways, he stopped and he turned. And as soon as he started to come back at me, it was game over for the bear. I had no choice. And I don't know what possessed him to do that, but that's what he decided to do, and it didn't end well for him. The second time was here at the cabin, and it was 2 years ago. And there was a black bear here, and I did a video on this, and I'll put the video below, a link. And, I had no choice. I didn't know it at the time, but that bear was wounded. And what had happened was somebody had shot him with an arrow through the front shoulder and right through the shoulder. They missed everything vital. The arrow must have came out about that far through his chest. Somewhere along the line, he managed to break that arrow off. I mean, the poor bear must have been in terrible pain. It must have been awful. And I didn't know he was wounded until after I shot him. And anyways, when I was cleaning him and I pulled that arrow out, half an arrow shaft, I mean, I was like, that explained it all. And it looked like somebody had shot him probably with that arrow about 4 or 6 weeks before this happened. So he was suffering. He was desperate. He was suffering. It was all infected. You could smell it. It was smelled terrible. He must have been in that poor bear. I really felt bad for him, but I didn't waste him. I harvested what I could off of him. I like bear meat, so I harvested what I could. I kept his hide. I did everything I could to whatever. And of course, on that video, the first person that commented called me an idiot. I said, I don't care that. I don't care if he called me an idiot or not. It doesn't mean anything to me. Doesn't mean nothing. Did he even watch the video? I mean, I had no choice. I had to defend myself against that bear. And you don't know what you're dealing with. So you get a wounded animal. There is nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal, especially a bear. So you can't always assume that bear is going to run, because that bear didn't. Anyways, so aside from dealing with wildlife, well, you also have to, and it sort of goes back to both wildlife and being mentally fit, you can't let your mind run away out here. There's things that happen here, especially in the middle of the night, that can play tricks on your mind. If you're not used to it, if you don't know what it is. For example, you have never heard anything until you've heard two raccoons fighting in the middle of the night. And especially here, because let me tell you, here there's no noise pollution, and there's no light pollution either. Everything here is dead quiet in the middle of the night, dead quiet. And when you're woken up at 3 a.m. and there's two raccoons outside fighting, you would swear that it was banshees from hell have arrived at the cabin outside. Like, you have never heard anything like it in your life. It is wild. And sometimes, and when you're woken up at 3 a.m. like that, it can, you're kind of like, what are you doing? Your first thing is that instinct kicks in, this fight or flight thing. You're like, what's going on? You grab a gun. You're just, the adrenaline just is 100%. Like, what is happening? Because you're being woke up out of a deep sleep, right? And those things happen. Rabbits getting killed. I heard a rabbit one time. I'm pretty sure it was a rabbit. It was right outside the cabin again, and right on the other side of the wall from my bed. And something got a rabbit in the middle of the night, and it was squealing. If you've ever heard a rabbit cry, I mean, it is something wild to hear. And I mean, something got it. You're just laying there going, oh, please just, hurry up and kill that rabbit and go. And anyways, that's what you have to put up with. And then other things, you don't know what's out there. I remember one time I woke up again, I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning or something, in the middle of the night. And there was something outside just screeching, this blood-curdling screaming. And I have no idea what that was. And of course, again, you wake up in the middle of the night, your first reaction is, what the heck is going on? You grab your gun and I go outside on the porch, and I could hear something going through the woods. I couldn't see anything. I had the flashlight, and it'd go through the woods, and it was just screaming and screeching, this noise I'd never heard before. And I have no idea what that was. Some sort of animal, but I don't know what. But your mind can really play tricks on you if you're, if you let it. So when those things kind of happen, you got to be able to put that stuff out of your mind and say, okay, well, whatever, and come back in and close the door and go back to bed and try to get some sleep, because there's not much you can do about it. It is what it is. Anyway, but there's lots of those are the things you have to deal with animals, and it's just the way it is out here in the woods. But it's not all, like that. There's lots of good times out here too, and that's why I'm out here. The solitude and the peace and the quiet, and that's what it's all about, to be out here. you know, you go through the years. Like I said, you go through a year. We have all 4 seasons here, so you know, in the wintertime, you're really busy with snow removal, but there's lots of days where you can't do anything. Keep the road cleared out. But then you get in the springtime, and of course, it's a tradition here to tap sugar maple trees and make maple syrup. So you know, every spring I hit those trees, and there's nothing like maple syrup, fresh maple syrup on pancakes. Check out that video below. Other things you do, you can go out, and then of course, once the snow all melts off, then you get into fiddlehead season, and fiddleheads are a delicious fern that grows here in the spring of the year, and you can go out and catch some nice trout, and man, there's nothing like it. And I put a video, again, there's a link in the description below, so check out that video of fiddleheads and trout. Of course, you know, the downside of that is you have to put up with the black flies, which I don't know. I mean, they're just unholy here in the spring of the year, but that's all right. You take the bad with the good. And then you get into summer and the heat of the summer here, and you know, everything's back to life, and you know, nature doesn't relent. There's always something to do. There's roads to maintain. There's wood to cut. There's, you know, there's lots to do. One of my favorite things to do is firewood. That's probably my all-time favorite chore here is firewood. I love cutting wood. I love getting down in the woods. I love cutting wood and splitting wood, and it's a necessary task as well. So it's and splitting wood. You know, I can stand out there. I got a wood splitter too for the really nasty stuff. I put it on the back of my tractor. I got a homemade wood splitter, and it works really well. And I usually use it, like I said, for the really tough stuff. But most of the time I'll split with a wood maul, and I'll split by hand, and it's almost meditative. I could just stand out there for hours and split wood. I know it sounds like a lot of work and it's crazy, but it's a thing. I enjoy it. And then you know, there's always brush to cut. It never ends, you know, trying to keep things, you know, cut back here, and you know, you've got to have equipment. You got to maintain your equipment, and yeah, there's a lot to do. And then of course fall comes, and well, then in the summer too, you got your garden. You have to have your garden. So I like to put in a garden. So here's a clip from the garden, and put the link in the video below. I like to have a small little garden, just enough to have some fresh vegetables. And then in the fall of the year, of course, you're into hunting season, and fall is one of my favorite times of the year. And I love to hunt, and I like to get out. And sometimes I don't get anything. Sometimes you're lucky, and sometimes you're not, and that's all part of hunting. And but every day that you're out in the woods and enjoying nature, I think it's a successful hunt. So even though I don't come back with anything every time, if I can come back, if I can just spend the day out in the woods, I think I have something. So yeah. And then of course you're pushing back into winter again, and you know, every winter is different. Sometimes they're wicked hard winters here, and a lot of snow and very cold, and you just have to wait and see what happens. But all in all, I'll tell you what, guys, I think this video is probably getting quite long. I thought I could do it in 10 or 15 minutes. It's probably going to end up closer to 20 minutes of me babbling on about what it's like. But it's really hard to really, you know, I'm just trying to condense it all in this short video, whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes. It's a lot to talk about in a short period of time. But that's in a nutshell what it's like to be here. And I think to get the full experience, you do have to be here year round, and you have to spend extended periods of time here. And because that's when you really find out what it's really like. Anyway, that's my take on it, guys. I want to thank you very much for watching. If you're new, do subscribe. Please give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate the support. leave me some comments below. Ask me anything you want about life here at the cabin, what it's like to be here. I love reading those comments. I try to answer as many as I can. I try. And I appreciate everyone watching these videos. Thanks a lot, guys. And we'll see you soon back here at the cabin.